It's about family, and it's about trust, and it's about relationships. It's about a woman who's kind of struggling to get to grips with, what she wants to, or just kind of struggling to get to grips with what's going on in her life, essentially. And it's her trying to kind of sift through the sea of problems that kind of emerge. The character I play is a young, 18-year-old lad who's in his first year at uni. He's radicalized during the events of, what happens. His whole life is kind of in question. The circumstances under which he is in are are horrible. They're really, really, really terrible. He's in a really terrible position for like a young lad. It's really scary as a young man. He's drawn into all this kind of, fighting and all this aggression and all this hatred, and he's torn apart completely, I think. It's a shock. Obviously, you wouldn't think this would happen to a young lad who's, my age. It's more often than not, it's kind of a build-up of little things. He's had big problems in his life, but it gets to a point where a little thing happens and he's just, he's just past that point of of being with his family, being in the UK. He just feels very, to some extent, out of place, but not just out of place, in terms of where he is, because he's a young, likable, really like a likable young man who, one day just lets loose. There's sides of radicalization that you don't think about, that aren't talked about. And it's the fact that a young, smart human being, because he's not stupid by any means at all, and it's the fact that a young, smart human being could be led into this. I think the general kind of perception is that, oh, you must be really, stupid to get radicalized. I don't think that that's the case. He's vulnerable to some extent, um, but it just shows the realness of it, and the harsh reality that this young man can get caught up into something so easily. It was mental. Um, it's one of those things that you kind of don't expect to get, but it was also something that I was very passionate about, because you don't get the opportunity to really say something. I don't feel like a lot nowadays. I feel like there are a lot of, showing. There's a lot of showing and a lot of showing, but I think this is showing, but it's also, I don't want to say educating, but telling people that this is a real thing that happens, and it's so relevant, so relevant, to a point where it's something that just needs to be said. It's not a show that, could just be a sideline. It needs to be, on our TV screens. I think it is very important now more than ever. And obviously, of the tragedies of the last couple of weeks. They really make it a lot more real. Um, it's real already, and it's truthful already. But something like what happened in Manchester happens. It makes you see what you're doing through another lens, almost. And it's almost scarier when you're near it. Anyone who was in, London at the time of, or Manchester at the time of uh, those bombings, it's really terrifying. My first instinct, in terms of playing it, and in terms of my, where my mind was at, I was like, oh, it's a, young, vulnerable lad. It's not until kind of slightly later that I realized that, it's a young, vulnerable, but capable young man. It's scary because that could have been me. I'm in the exact same position, and I'm almost, while I'm doing this, I'm almost making myself aware of what could happen to me or one of my mates. So it does, ground you, and it adds a new layer of, kind of meaning for me. But you don't realize, kind of the domino effect of just one person's actions, of just one person just doing one thing, and that's a catalyst for a whole sea of heartbreak and trauma. It's not just my character that faces that kind of, emotional, real emotional trauma. It's all the rest of the family as well, because they can't do anything, and most of them don't know what's going on at all. And it's only, Archie's character who really knows what's happening. And that's why I found it really interesting, with Archie and Jack, how their relationship is almost, breaking at breaking point because of me, and how a young kid can ruin someone's marriage, can ruin his auntie's marriage. My character, I think, is in need of some sort of role model, some sort of good role model. And maybe he sees that in Archie's character. And in that way, that takes her away from her whole family. And I think that's what's beautiful about the script, that it shows the effect on everyone's lives.